Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. It's Wednesday, and often we have a really good thing happen on Wednesdays around here. Our chaplain comes in, and we have an hour with the chaplain. If you have need of a chaplain today, we're willing to share them with you. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. We call these hours the chaplain is in, and we focus on more pastoral things. Maybe a question about your married life, family life, prayer life, your status via the sacraments. All those things are welcome. Actually, Father will probably take any question. He's not going to fight you off. 888-318-7884. Well, Father, it's very nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
I know you haven't seen me very much this week, and I apologize for it. You know what? Of which I speak. I have these morning appointments this week, so I haven't seen you when I usually see you.
Yeah, it's too bad, but anyway, but we'll make up for it later.
Thank you for never making me feel guilty about it. You don't make any of us feel guilty. You're not a guilty guy.
Not. I'm not into
you're
that.
Not you're not a dump guilt on people guy.
Guilt and shame. It's something to be dealt with, but it's not our principal method.
What is our principal method?
Love.
You wow.
Imagine that. That's what Jesus said. I know people don't want to believe it, but it's true.
Love one another as I've loved you.
Right.
For example.
Absolutely. The new commandment.
Right. I really like your preaching, Father. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that. You give these things called homilies. Well, other people call them homilies.
Yeah.
And are we still putting them on the internet when they're?
No. They record them, but I don't think they put any of them up.
Oh, they don't put them up anymore?
Not lately, no.
Because you're too wild. Because you get too wild on us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You just say wild, outlandish things. Like
no,
that.
I do not.
Like that we should love one another. And
no, okay. Yeah.
So I missed Mass this morning. What did you preach on this morning? Was it good? Did you give a good?
Preached on St. Vincent and
which St. Vincent is it? Is it
Vincent
Paul?
of Saragossa?
Oh,
the
one.
deacon martyr of Spain.
Yeah.
Which is celebrated today in the States because the feast day in the universal calendar is yesterday. But since in the States we had the observance of the Day of Reparation for the protection of unborn life,
right?
So the feast was moved today.
Yeah.
So I preached on that martyrdom and the way that which the early church viewed the martyrs and their cheekiness.
The cheekiness of the martyrs.
Yeah. The martyrs
Like,
kind of get a
over, I'm done on
pass.
this side?
They get a pass, sort of, because they even in today's church, when they consider the cause of a martyr, they're not held to as quite a high a standard of behavior as other saints.
Oh,
because the martyrdom kind of
takes care of, expiates.
Yeah, and there's some great stories about martyrs who were absolutely furious when they were being, where they really gave it to their persecutors, like verbally and otherwise. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, they weren't just like little lambs to the slaughter.
Well, some of them were. That's very sweet. But
yeah.
On the other hand, they were tough,
But the fact that you are willing for martyrdom and then you undergo, by the grace of God, martyrdom.
Right. It's a supreme act of charity. Greater love than this no man has.
Okay. All right. So
like that poor kid from Covington Catholic, I was looking at a smirk on his face. He did have a smirk, but you can imagine some of the young martyrs of antiquity looking at their Roman persecutors with kind of a similar smirk. Say, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right.
Here, kitty.
Yeah. Here, kitty. And then out comes the lion.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Again, 888-318-7884, the number. The chaplain is in. I don't want to burden you, Father, but because we have some calls and I'm going to get to them. But it really bears mentioning that assistant producer Marie is working on it.
Okay.
Don't worry. You look concerned that the calls had not been processed yet. She's working on it. Or maybe she's doing counseling of her own. Maybe she's acting as the chaplain. Assistant producer Marie, are you chaplaining or are you call screening in there? Oh, she can't hear me.
She's a pastoral assistant.
I think she's assisting pastorally. Every call she takes disappears, though, so I think she might be getting rid of our callers. This is what
that is not the kind of thing you're supposed to say on the air, are you?
I don't think. Look, I think a good percentage of the things I say on the air are things you're not supposed to say on the air, Father.
Okay, fine. Right.
I just have not gotten the rule book yet. They keep telling me they're going to give me the rule book.
Okay, but now let's get back to what you were going to say.
Yeah, actually, I was very disturbed by the video out of New York where there's a new absolutely maniac law on killing babies right up to the moment of their birth. And I say babies because, look, I understand that people can be confused about the early stages of human life. I understand that people can be confused about that. I'm not justifying. I'm just saying I understand. Nobody is confused about a 9-month-old baby. There's
No.
nobody is. There's nobody in the world
No,
who thinks
no.
clump of cells or baby is the word.
Right.
And so baby murder is now being celebrated on television by the governor of New York and everything, and it's on the 46th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision. And
It's like they didn't go far enough, so he's going to.
oh, that wasn't enough. No, we got to go farther and farther. I mean, I don't know that we'll be satisfied until we're. I don't know what we'll have to be doing.
Well,
but
it's fiendish. It's you have to get the witch midwives involved so they can actually murder the babies, an old-fashioned style like they did.
Did they do that
in
in
days
the
of
olden
yore?
days?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just like horrible.
I am sorry to hear it, but it's very disturbing. I thought it bears mentioning, and I didn't mean to burden the day of the chaplain being here with that, but not
But
all witches are bad, by the
The
way.
thing that's troubling about it is that he is officially a Roman Catholic.
Oh, the governor of New York.
So we'd like
Yeah.
to know what's going to happen in terms of the church's response to his horrible
Right. I
support of this.
again, you can understand.
But you explain what it was, because people don't know. Maybe they don't know.
Okay, so what's happening is that people are afraid that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned because that seems like a realistic possibility now for the first time.
Well, not overturned, but weakened probably. Is more
Okay,
like,
so, okay, there you go. Fair enough. And so in states like New York and California, which are death cults in their legislatures and in the governors, they're death cults. They have decided to make outrageous laws and then celebrate each other for making these outrageous laws, because they feel that if the Supreme Court sends this back to the states, then they'll have what they call legal protections. But these are not protections; these are licenses to kill.
But they're
innocent
basically
children.
saying what?
They're saying,
Don't even need a doctor, right?
"Oh no, it's right. It's just so extreme." Okay, fair enough, Father. You
That's
keep
the
pushing me
point.
to actually share
Trying
the
to
news.
say what the
Sorry,
issue
I'm
is,
sharing
yeah.
my opinion, but you want
Right.
me to share the news? Yeah. So there's things like midwives can kill, physicians' assistants can kill, and this killing can go on till the very moment that the child is born. And as we've seen before, that will mean that for some certain percentage, it will be killing the child after the child is born and saying that this was done before the
Yeah, well,
child
who's
was born.
going to know?
Right, who's going to know? There's no cameras in there. So horrifying state of affairs, and I didn't want to leave it unmentioned, but it is
Well,
always
let's
a
pray
joyful...
for our much oppressed country, oppressed by many evils.
Amen, Father. The chaplain is in. Enough of the news of the day. Let us go to Annette in North Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Annette, your question for Father.
Oh, I do. Thank you for taking my call. It may be a very basic question for most Catholics. I'm just getting back into my faith, so I'm learning a lot. My question is about purgatory. When the souls are in purgatory, is there anything that they can do to get out, or is it all dependent on us praying for them?
Well, the souls in purgatory are not able to do anything to help themselves. They are in a completely passive state. So they're in a state of purification, and therefore they can only depend upon the action of God on their soul, purifying them, and then the loving help of the living and the intercessions of the saints for their purification. So that's why the Church is so eager to encourage us to pray for the holy souls, because unlike people we help on earth who can do something to help themselves, the souls in purgatory are unable to do anything on their own behalf. Yeah. So there's a reason for that, in that the soul is separated from the body, and so there's not any way that they can actually act on their own behalf. So they just have to wait patiently for our assistance. So that's why they really need it.
Okay.
And are there different levels of purgatory?
Well, according to certain traditions, yeah, I would say the simple thing is that each human being is a different individual. And just as God deals differently with different people in their earthly life, so too after this life, he purifies them differently and at different rates and different aspects. For example, St. Thomas Aquinas says that someone who committed some really grave, horrible sin might be purified very intensely and painfully, but quickly, whereas someone else who had fewer faults but who had deeply rooted defects might be purified over a longer period of time, but not so intensely. Because, God is a physician of souls, and so whatever the remedy is for the particular soul, that's what is given to him or to her. And so consequently, you could talk about levels in the sense that there's probably a greater and greater ability to receive the benefits of the church's prayers and the masses and everything as the soul moves along. And St. Thomas Aquinas says that the best way to be assured of assistance after we ourselves die is to be devout towards the souls in purgatory while we're living. He says the souls of the departed who get the most help after death are the ones that were most devoted to the dead while they were living. So that's a little warning to us.
Oh, so
to say pray for the dead, and the dead will pray for you.
I know the end of that song can't be true, though.
I don't know the whole song. So
Simply because they have nothing else to do.
Nothing better to do.
Nothing better to do. Fair enough. Annette, thanks very, very much for your call. The chaplain is in today. If you have a question that requires a chaplain, give us a call, 888-318-7884. All that pro-life stuff is still on sale for $5 each, whether it's a book, a DVD, CD, whatever. It's all on sale at shop.catholic.com. If we have a pro-life item that comes from us, you can have it for $5 this month. Shop.catholic.com. Click on the $5 pro-life. Is it a sign or a banner? A banner. Thank you. I couldn't remember, Nick. Why are you looking at me?
Catholic Answers Live. EWTN is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If your cable or satellite provider doesn't carry EWTN's full programming lineup, give them a call and let them know you would like to receive EWTN 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For more information, go to EWTN.com and click on television.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Welcome back. It's Catholic Answers Live. Chaplain is in this hour. Happy to take your call. Second hour, by the way, is going to be a pro-life open forum. Stephanie Gray from Love Unleashes Life will be here. She's about as good as they get as far as pro-life conversations. So whether you're pro-life or not, she'll be happy to take your call. That's second hour. This hour, Father Hugh Barber, our chaplain, is here. And next up is Rebecca in Kansas City, Kansas, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Thanks for downloading the app onto your phone, Rebecca. Your question for Father.
Hi. First of all, thanks for taking my call. Father Hugh, it's such an honor for me to talk to you. The Norbertine priests have been a huge impact in my life. You guys really helped to develop who my husband became. He attended the boys' preparatory, James Schrader.
Nope.
Hello?
Then,
oh,
hello,
you popped out on us there for a second.
So, okay, sorry.
Go ahead. That's all right. Your question for Father.
Oh, okay. So I was just saying, thank you so much. The Norbertine priests have really had a big impact in my life. The Abbey really helped develop who my husband became. James Schrader attended St. Michael's Preparatory.
We know him.
So, Father Chrysostom celebrated my marriage, and Father Sebastian is who my second son is named after. So
that's a pretty good group of guys. Oh, that's pretty good.
Awesome,
it's pretty good,
awesome.
Yeah.
All threes are perfect.
So, yes. Okay, so my question, Father, thank you. So I'm at a stage now where any of my extended family is listening. They often do. We just found out I'm pregnant, so
congratulations.
Thank you. And we are now in stages of discerning if I should stay home with our kids or not. I teach special education to students with emotional disturbances, and it's really kind of.
We keep losing you.
To decide.
You're trying to.
Okay.
It sounds like you're trying. I'm sorry, just because you're coming in and out. Let me see if I can just sum it up, Father. You're trying to decide how much to stay home and how much it's okay to work. Is that all right? Is that basically right?
Yeah. Just the difference between being prudent and trusting in God's will.
Fair enough. How do we make these decisions, Father?
Well, they're very concrete decisions, and so of course you could make the decision, of course, in company with your husband and his perceptions of the situation. And if you have older children that are capable of reasoning about these things, I don't know if you do, you might even include them at least towards the end, to explain your decision or whatever. But I would say that, of course, your first duty is to your family, to your own children. As we say, charity begins at home. But on the other side, the example of your service to those in need and your work for the family are also not without value. So I would just say you have to, how many children do you have now?
Oh, she has 3. She's expecting her 4th.
Three. Okay, I didn't see 3. I just saw you expecting, but I didn't see. Okay, so 4. Well, it looks to me like you're getting to the point where it's going to be hard to maintain things if you're away, say, as a full-time job or a half-time job even. Do you do homeschooling also?
No.
Okay. Good. Okay.
My oldest attends Catholic preschool.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Good, because I would always. So
they're all young.
Preschool. So they're all very young. Yeah. Well, now there's several things. Of course, you can consider who might be able to give you some help, so that you might be able to do some measure of what you're professionally able to do. I'm thinking of this just because it's always good to keep one's professional capacities kind of on the back burner, so that they're not completely gone, or there's not a long period of separation from the things you're actually able to do in your employment. So my first reaction is I would just reduce what you're doing, if that's possible, rather than just eliminate it altogether, just in order to keep up contact with the work that you've been doing. But again, it has so much to do with your discernment with your husband. I mean, and I don't know your concrete circumstances or the financial aspects or all of that. But I would say the main thing is, if you discern with your husband what to do, it will be pleasing to God. You don't have to feel bad about deciding to stay at home and not to go and do that service to the special needs children. On the other hand, if you do decide to do that to some degree or another, you don't have to feel like you're doing something that's neglecting your children. God will figure it out. But the way He governs us in our life is by our own deliberation and decision about what we should do, and that shows you His will. And so, short of a revelation, He's going to bless whatever you honestly decide after having considered the matter prayerfully.
Okay, Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
God bless
Rebecca.
you. God bless you. Peace.
It's interesting what you say, Father, because a lot of us think of discernment as finding out what God is trying to get us to do, instead of a kind of a more cooperative thing, like you said.
I always tell people, God governs His creation by the nature of each created thing, and He created us with the use of reason and free will.
Yeah.
And so when we use our reason and free will by prayerfully deliberating and trying to come to a decision, that's how He governs us. So normally I tell people, the way you're going to find out what God's will is when you decide what it is you're going to do.
And then He wills to help.
And He
you.
has other things to do. But I mean, as long as it's not sin or some obvious illusion or self-deception involved, if you're really seriously trying to discern, you're prayerfully trying to discern, then even if it should be a decision which is going to lead you into difficulty, that also could be part of God's plan. But the point is, He's not going to be displeased with you.
Decide and don't worry.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, but it can't be a delusional thing. Like you kind of crushed my hopes of being a supermodel there, Father. But all right, I'm discerned out of that now. Alice.
I thought you were
a supermodel
on the weekends.
Yeah. A lot of people get that impression.
Yeah.
Alice, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Thanks for downloading the app, Alice. Your question for Father.
Thank you for taking my call. I received a few emails this morning with a note to write my bishop, and the enclosed article was from whom I think is a reputable Catholic site, and it had a picture of my bishop and very disturbing pictures of 2 young priests in a homosexual relationship, and unfortunately and sadly, the one priest was in my parish as a deacon for a year, and then we just all came to love him, and we celebrated him becoming a priest just last year. And then he was moved, but not far away, and we have visited him. And it was him in the picture with another young priest from another local parish. And I would like to know if it would be sinful for me to pass this site on to others as it's coming to me, and if it would be respectful and okay for me to write to my bishop.
Well, I think what you should do is write the bishop and say, I don't know if any of this is true, but I received this, and just put it in front of him. But I definitely would not send it on, because, I mean, the picture you saw, what is the picture of? Is it something obscene?
Well, there's multiple pictures that the one priest put on his Facebook page that he thought was secret, and as soon as it was revealed, he took that website down.
Oh.
And the picture had been sent to our bishop in November, asking him to please act on it or they would go public.
Well, the thing is that the people that know the information with certitude should act on it, but that you have no obligation to act on this information if you're just getting it by hearsay and with a certain story from the people that are trying to get people to write the bishop. So the most I would do in this case is I would just say, you know, Your Excellency, I received this information. I don't know if it's true or not, or if it is what it appears to be, and I don't know if there's some other explanation or whatever, but please know that this is out there and that you're going to have to deal with it sooner or later anyway. But I would not pass it on to others, because there's so many cases where you know, it seems black and white to some people, but then to other people it doesn't. I mean, I knew of a case of a priest who had you know, the Facebook and the little avatars that people have next to their name. They can change them, and several of his contacts, they had inappropriate avatars, not obscene, but just kind of inappropriate on a priest thing. And people started writing the bishop saying, look what he has in his Facebook account. Well, that's not dependent on him. It's dependent on the people that have the avatars there.
Yeah.
And so it caused him no end of trouble. And so I would say that unless you have direct knowledge of what has been going on with these newly ordained priests, I would just pass on passing the information on. I would just write the bishop and say, I received all this, and I know you're probably going to act on it, but just know that this is all being spread. And he probably knows that already, but I would just do that. I don't think that people who don't have direct knowledge of seriously, gravely immoral and scandalous acts on the part of priests should be repeating them if they're not absolutely certain, and they should repeat them to the people who can do something about it.
Okay, Alice?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, and just pray for him too, okay?
And,
Yes.
for your bishop.
Yeah.
Father, a question from Facebook. Why did the Pope, or why was the title Patriarch of the West dropped for the Pope? Do you know?
Well, Pope Benedict, the title Patriarch of the West was not one of the Pope's titles until the 1860s, when it was added under Pius IX to the list of the Pope's titles. They did that in an atmosphere where the Pope was being assailed on all sides by civil authorities, and they were trying to take the papal states away and all of that. But it wasn't a traditional title, because the Roman Church has never accepted the patriarchal theory of church governance, which the Orthodox have.
Okay.
The so-called pentarchy, that there are 5 ancient patriarchates and the church is governed by them, and Rome is the first place and Constantinople the second, and all that. I mean, those sees have certain superiority, but the Roman pontiffs have always tended to, following the example of Gregory the Great, who explicitly told the Byzantine emperor, I don't want to be called the patriarch, I'm just the Bishop of Rome. Because he knew that that was the title that they feared. Because if they use the title patriarch, it's a juridical term, and they can marginalize his role. But the fact is, by our teaching, the Roman primacy of the successor Peter is part of the Church's divine constitution. It's not part of the the ecclesiastical order of the early church. It's a permanent element that's there forever.
Yeah.
And so Pope Benedict wanted to remove that precisely so as not to imply that the Roman primacy had anything to do with the patriarchates. And the fact is, there never was any such thing as a patriarch of the West. I mean, never. I mean, there's no such thing as a patriarch of the West. What is the West?
Yeah.
You know, it's like that. I mean, the Pope made.
Well, it's the opposite of the East. I know that.
Right. But I mean, they had a patriarch of Venice, patriarch of Lisbon.
Yeah.
You know,
but
other
the West
things.
is
But the West, that's like,
amorphous.
what is that? The whole world, if you're Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Because if you're Roman Rite, that's the West.
All right.
Even if you're in Egypt.
Thanks for the question, John. We'll take a quick break. The chaplain is in. If you've got a question for the chaplain, the number is 888-31-TRUTH. More of your questions for Father right after this.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old children or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture decays, we have to know how to talk to our children about these issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level to meet the world's challenges. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging onto the shop at Catholic.com.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Tom Price.
And I'm Gloria Purvis. Tomorrow, we'll bring you all the Catholic news of the day, along with interviews with newsmakers and our godly counsel.
Please join us for Morning Glory, 7 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Wish you could join us during the breaks.
Here we
Father
are.
gives cooking lessons to the studio, explaining to the young men in the video and audio departments how to make the perfect grilled cheese at the break. And it was impressive.
Yes.
We maybe should do hey, Marie, we could do that as a bonus
walking
thing for Radio
advertisement.
Club. We could do an interview with Father about how to make the perfect grilled cheese.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I thought that I was very impressed with the sage and the Dijon mustard. I was very impressed with that.
Well, they're not on the same one. Those are two
No,
different
but these are
preparations.
right. These are different approaches to the perfect grilled cheese sandwich. Jack in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. You are up next, Jack. Your question for Father.
Father, I'll try to make this as quick as I can, but here's my issue. I have a friend who is a young woman who is just in a very bad place spiritually. She's an atheist. She does a lot of things that are very questionable, and I was praying for her for a while, and she indicated to me for a little while that she even got the impression that maybe Christ was talking to her. Now she's angry at me and she's alienated me, etc. And I really feel this is somebody who needs prayer. Now, where I'm going with all this is this. I understand it's the church's teaching that we should pray for souls in purgatory, but the souls in purgatory are bound for heaven whatever we do. The people here in this world are still at least potentially damned.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we then why would it seems almost like every prayer for a soul in purgatory is wasted because it could be spent on somebody here who may spend eternity separated from God.
Well, actually, God knows the outcome, and I would say that there are different aspects in which you consider the matter. Yes, it's true, prayer for the living who are in danger of their eternal salvation is a very important thing, and particularly the offering the Holy Mass for them, because the Mass offered on earth, it's applied directly to the souls of those for whom it's offered if they're baptized. But in the case of souls in purgatory, they can't do anything to help themselves, and so you just have to consider the situation they're in. It's like my mother taught school for years and years and years, and she taught seventh graders, and finally she decided she wanted to teach kindergartners because they're easier. So the souls in purgatory, they pose no resistance to the prayers we offer for them, and they then reach heaven and gratefully intercede for those who have prayed for them. And I often have this approach, and St. John Vianney, who of course saved many, many souls, the great Curé d'Ars, who spent hours in the confessional saving souls from hell, he used the souls in purgatory as his means. He would entrust to the souls in purgatory, once they were liberated, the soul of the sinner who was resisting his teaching or advice. And so we're in a communion of saints, and so it's really almost impossible that some good that we do to one member of the body is going to hurt or limit or deprive someone else. I think that we can view it as all of a piece. I often offer prayers or masses for the souls in purgatory with a particular intention in mind, that someone's heart might be softened, or someone, because they're so grateful that they intercede continually for the things that we've asked for, because they're so grateful that we help them to enter heaven more swiftly. So I think that both things can go together. We can, what I would do with that woman, for example, pray for her departed, all her departed ancestors who are ignored or are not cared for, and ask for their assistance also in praying for her and obtaining her salvation. Does that sound okay?
It does. I'm 55 years a Catholic, and this is the first I've ever heard of anything like this.
Well, it's in the Catechism, and it's in the teaching of the saints that we can unite ourselves with the souls in purgatory in praying for them, and that's what we mostly do, because they need to be prayed for more than they pray. But they're so grateful to us as benefactors, then that they'll certainly help us with our own particular intentions, and because they don't want people not just not to go to hell, but also not even to have to go to purgatory. There's a beautiful treatise by Father Faber of the Oratory, and one of his works on purgatory, and he very, very well explains this. And the Catechism says clearly that by our prayer for the departed, we're assured of their prayer for us. And I think it's very helpful to pray for the departed of people who are troubled or in need of graces of salvation, because their relatives and ancestors who've gone before us, who may have been saved, would be particularly interested in assisting them because of their bond, their natural bond.
Jack, thank you very, very much. A whole bunch of calls for the chaplain today. Okay. So we go now to Christine in Columbus, Ohio, also listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Christine, your question for Father.
Sure. I had a question about adoration. I live actually an hour away from Columbus, so I can't find an adoration chapel that's perpetual, and I can't go as often as I'd like. So I've seen these virtual ones on YouTube, and I was wondering, what the thought is, if that's, valid. Is that something I can do? Is that something that's bad? I'm just not quite sure what, if I should even, utilize that type of adoration.
Well, of course, if you're doing it virtually with your computer, you're not really in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. You're in front of your computer, and I would say better. And there really isn't any difference, really, between adoring our Lord in the tabernacle and adoring our Lord exposed. So if you have a Catholic church nearby where you can just visit our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, it's the same. You don't have to be there with the sacrament exposed. at all, And so I would say my first choice would be in your neighborhood is just to go to a Catholic church when the church is open, when you're able to visit the Blessed Sacrament, and make your adoration then before the tabernacle, because then the sacrament is really there. I'm not saying there's anything, evil about. I've noticed that. I've seen that online. Just the streaming picture of the monstrance. Although I've noticed, and this is any of you who are doing this, notice that liturgically the manner in which the Blessed Sacrament is exposed is incorrect. So on a number of them, just to let you know, from the point of view of liturgical, as people get so used to doing anything they want that they, do all kinds of things. But I would just say there's nothing wrong with it. If it inspires your devotion, fine. But if you really want to be in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, then you need to go to a church, and praying in front of the tabernacle is just as good as praying in front of the monstrance. It's just if it's not available, that's what I would recommend.
Okay, Christine?
Yeah, but the problem is when you work and you get home,
Yeah.
a lot of times the churches are locked,
Yeah.
and you can't get in.
Yeah, well, there's a problem. You might talk to your priest about that, or just make the intention that you intend to visit our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament wherever He's present in the nearest place or wherever in the whole world, He will take that faith in the Eucharist and the power of the real presence, and He will make it fruitful for your prayer. That was very common in the old days, that people would make these holy hours of adoration that they just made at home. Father Matteo, the famous Father Matteo, did that, promoting Eucharistic adoration. And if you couldn't get to church, then he had some prayers you could say at home. But I would just say, do the best you can. And it's not the thing you don't understand is it's not exactly adoration when it's just the picture on the screen, but it is connecting you here and now in real time with the host, which is somewhere. And so there's some sense to it. I get the point why people would want to do that, but I just should say that what I want to emphasize is that the adoring Lord in the tabernacle or in the monstrance is the same. Yeah.
Yep. All right, Christine.
God bless you.
Thank you very, very much for that call. Tony in Chicago, Illinois, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio Channel 130. You are up next, Tony. Your question for Father.
Hi, I went to Catholic school here in Chicago many years ago, run by the Congregation of the Resurrection Fathers. And my question is,
are you Polish? Are you Polish?
No, I'm Italian.
Oh, they're Polish.
Many of my friends are Polish.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah. But many of the religious were brothers, and then others were priests. And I was just wondering why a man to go into religious vocation would not continue to just become a priest. Why would you stay a brother your entire religious life?
Well, the religious life is a form of life where you profess our Lord's evangelical counsels, that is, poverty, chastity, and obedience. And that really is for any Christian, and originally it was mostly for lay Christians. Most religious were laymen, just like with the sisters. To be a priest is a further vocation beyond being a religious, and so they're not quite the same. Just as you see that, because you have your diocesan priests who are not religious but they're priests, and then you have religious priests who profess the religious vows and also are ordained to the priesthood. So it just depends upon the vocation of each one. There are plenty of men who want to live a religious life who don't feel like they're called to the particular works of the priestly ministry, of saying Mass and preaching and hearing confessions, either because they're not up for the studies or because they are not inclined or don't have the personality, or they need to dedicate themselves to other works full time, so it's just a question. The religious life as such is just a normal choice for a Christian, but the priesthood is a step beyond that requires certain qualifications that exceed those of the religious life.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for calling from Chicago. I love Chicago, Father. It's one of my favorite big cities. I love it.
The Windy City.
The Windy City. It's so organized. It's like on this grid. It's not like the crazy East Coast cities, like Boston. Man, you couldn't care less. I could just.
No, I'm just trying to think about things I've seen in Chicago. I like the art museum there. It's really good.
Yeah, right. It's, by the park, by the river.
Beautiful churches everywhere.
I don't even know why we're talking about that. I just love Chicago. 888-318-7884. I wish we were on the air in Chicago. Everybody that calls us from Chicago has to listen to us some other way because we're not on the air in Chicago. But, hey, maybe someone in Chicago, if you have an extra 10 or 12 million around and you want to buy a radio station, we could be on the air there. Catholic Answers Magazine on sale right now. 1-year subscriptions, 2-year subscriptions, both on sale. Save up to $10, plus you get the free digital subscription when you subscribe. The offer is good through the end of this month, which is just days away. Go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com and get one of the finest Catholic magazines in the world.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic radio, I believe, is the greatest tool for evangelization that the church has today. And I know this because we hear from people all over the world that tell us all the time they came to faith in Christ, in the Catholic Church, through Catholic radio. Guy that lives right next door to you, he might not ask you about your Catholic faith, but he'll ask us. He'll call in and say, tell me about the Catholic Church.
Dr. David Anders thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. The chaplain is in, and that means Father Hugh Barber is here with us. He's our chaplain every day, tries to make sure that we love one another and love God. I don't know how you're doing on that regard. I mean, I guess we're trying, but
we do what we can, yeah.
I mean, maybe you need to put in more hours as a chaplain. But he's your chaplain for this hour. Let's go to Dion in the United Kingdom, who watches on Facebook Live. Dion, thanks for being with us. Your question for Father.
Oh, hi. Is it acceptable for two homosexuals to be in a chaste relationship?
Well, yes. In fact, it's the only acceptable thing. I would say if they're in a chaste relationship, then what it's called is a friendship, and that's what men need. They need to be friends to each other, and their individual inclinations. That is, whether they individually are more attracted to men than to women, is not the issue. The issue is the friendship, which all men need, whatever their inclinations. And so I would say, yes, it's acceptable, more than acceptable. It's necessary.
Is that an acceptable answer to you, Dion?
Men need friends, and the being unchaste part kind of complicates the matter. I don't know if you heard of Dame Rebecca West. She's a famous English author, proto-feminist in the old days. She said the problem with homosexuality is it complicates friendship with an element which doesn't belong to it, namely sexuality. So I would say, fine. I mean, there's nothing, the church doesn't teach that two men can't live together, share their lives with each other. You know, for heaven's sakes, Cardinal Newman determined that he should be buried not by his best friend, but in the same grave as his best friend. And they spoke of each other in terms which were extremely affectionate and we would almost call it romantic in our current language. But let's just say it's certainly acceptable because what we need is friendship, but we don't need unchastity because that'll screw it all up eventually, if not right away. So we have to observe the commandments of God and love God and not think that we're going to love our friend by doing something with him we shouldn't do. St. Augustine says in the Confessions, a friend is one from whose body we expect nothing but the signs of a good will. And that's the exact words. One from whose body we expect nothing but the signs of a good will. That's all right there.
Is that a satisfying answer to you, Dion?
Oh, thanks very much. Because what it is we used to be in a relationship, but since we found the Catholic Church and God, we've decided to be chaste and be in this friendship.
Very good,
and
right.
just help each other strive to be saints.
God bless you.
Well, God bless you. And, it sounds like you're dealing with the question of the occasion of sin. That's you have to judge that with your confessors and whatnot. But the fact that you had a sinful aspect of your relationship doesn't mean that everything about it was wrong, especially if you're particularly devoted to each other and want each other's spiritual good. So it's just like a man and a woman, same thing. Tons of people get married after having, committed fornication for years before they got married, but we don't tell them not to get married because they sinned before. So
yeah,
same with these couples. Sometimes that's the best friend you can have is someone that already knows you well.
Dion, very, very grateful for the call.
God bless you.
I hope you'll call again. And if you're in the UK, you go to the top of the line because
it's our mother
Anglican.
Country.
Oh, because it's our mother country. I thought it's because you're a former Anglican.
It's out of respect. Out of respect for our origins.
Go straight. Paul is calling from Braintree, Mass, which is just across the freeway from where I used to live. He's listening on 1060 AM.
Do they pluck you from the Braintree?
Station of the Cross? Yes. I mean, of course, clearly. I mean, think of the intellect you're dealing with here, Father. Mm-hmm. Why do you even ask? Paul, your question for Father.
Yes, good evening. It's a pleasure to speak to you, Father.
Yes,
Father,
sure.
I'm in my early 60s, and I'm a product of 10 years of Catholic school education, and I'm on fire for my faith. And one thing that I always forget to ask about is I remember learning in catechism about the position or scenario of limbo. And is limbo, to refresh my memory, is limbo synonymous with purgatory, and what exactly? I don't hear it discussed very much in Catholic circles nowadays. What's your take on it? Is there a connection to a purgatory? Can you just kind of refresh my memory on that?
Well, no, the only connection there is with purgatory is that they're both places after death which are not heaven. And so in that sense, there's a connection. But limbo is used in two ways. The limbo of the just, that is the place where the saved of the Old Covenant went before our Lord's passion and resurrection. And so it's where they went before they were granted entry into heaven. And then there's the so-called limbo of the infants, and that's of the children who die before the use of reason who are not baptized. Now that version of limbo is the one which is nowadays usually ignored or denied or is somewhat controversial. But it is a traditional position, namely that those children have no personal punishment. They don't suffer for their, they don't suffer after death, but they have a happiness which is merely natural and not the supernatural happiness of heaven. And that's a traditional thesis. It's not defined dogma. What the Church's dogma is that someone who doesn't have the use of reason, or a child before the age of reason, the Church knows of no secure way of their salvation other than the baptism. And that's in the New Catechism, John Paul II's Catechism, just to remind people. And so the necessity of baptism is what the Church actually teaches. And that's the main point. And then limbo is one way of dealing with the question of the necessity of baptism, given that people die without it, and yet they're not guilty of anything.
Paul, sorry, Father. Yeah. If you go to Catholic.com, our website, and just put in the word limbo, you'll also
have
find
all
lots
kinds
of stuff you can read there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul, very much for that question. We go now to Brad in Jackson, Michigan, listening on 93.3 FM. Brad, your question for Father. Brad, hang on, Brad. Hang on. Somebody pushed the wrong button, and it wasn't Father. Brad, your question for Father?
Yes, hi. I'm a Protestant, and I went to a Mass, and just was listening carefully, and when the bread and the wine were being sanctified or whatever, the priest said, we offer these as a sacrifice, or words like that. I might not have the exact words. And just, could you explain, because Protestants are taught that Christ was a sacrifice for our sins, and why are, a few pennies worth of bread and wine, why is that a sacrifice on our part?
Well, because in point of fact, Christ first offered his body and blood in sacrifice at the Last Supper when he instituted the Holy Communion, when he instituted the Eucharist and the Mass that you attended. That is, he said, this is my body, this is the chalice of my blood. And so what we have is, first of all, the actual historical sacrifice of Christ on the cross, where he shed his blood and offered his body for us. And then the sacrament, that is the appearances of bread and wine, are the way of conveying to us, by way of application of his sacrifice, the very things that he offered. So he gives the church his very self to offer as the only acceptable sacrifice ultimately to the Father. And so the sense in which the Mass is a sacrifice is that it contains or conveys the body and blood of the Lord that were offered on Calvary. Now, they're not offered again. They're just the fact is that God puts in our hands the very same things that are offered. Just like St. Paul says in the letter to the Hebrews, that Christ now presents his blood through the veil before the Father as his completed sacrifice. So we do the same in the Mass by offering up the body and blood of Christ under the appearance of the bread and wine after they've been consecrated. So it's the identical, numerically identical sacrifice as Calvary, but it's under the appearances of bread and wine so that we can receive those symbols for our spiritual nourishment. So that's the sense in which it's a sacrifice. But it is true, it's dependent entirely upon Calvary.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I've asked several of my Catholic friends, and they couldn't explain it. So,
Thank you.
That's why we have Father.
I gave
He's like
you the straight dope.
He's like the backup to every other Catholic on earth. Ask them. They don't know. Ask Father. Let us go now. Father, there was a question on Facebook. I'm sorry, Facebook has just been crazy with good questions today, and now I don't see the woman who asked it, but I'm going to ask it of you. Okay, there's an alcoholic. Goes to confession and confesses drunkenness because drunkenness is a serious sin. But the alcoholic is probably going to drink again and probably knows he's going to drink again. Question one is that confession valid? And two, can that after receiving, can that person go to communion?
Well, the thing there is that if we're dealing with the psychology of addiction, any decent psychotherapist, even a Catholic one, will tell you that there's not a whole lot of sin involved in the actual concrete state of an addict in terms of their ability to resist.
Okay.
And so you can make a very merciful judgment about their continued lapses, and the fact that they come seeking pardon and trying to do better, making some measure of progress. And so the confessor simply has to ask, if they're taking any means, but also the category alcoholic is not really part of Catholic moral theology.
Oh, okay.
It's part of modern psychology, or not even modern psychology, but even psychotherapy. It's not a listed problem. They have the abuse of alcohol is a problem, but they don't actually use the term alcoholic. And so the person should just be taken at face value, and if their continued falls indicate to the confessor that there's some deeper problem that needs to be dealt with, he can exhort the person to take the measures necessary to talk to their doctor, to do something, to seek some assistance, or even a program. But I would say I would be very hesitant to use the cudgel of refusal of absolution or anything like that to someone who in their weakness is coming and confessing this, even though they continually fall. I would be very reluctant to do that unless it's causing violence or danger to others, where they're really putting other people at risk. Yeah. But I would say if it's just a weakness like that, it's like continued sins of solitary impurity. The priest he would be a fool to just tell some young person, well, you can't. I'm not going to absolve you because you keep falling into this.
Right.
It's not reasonable given our culture and time. If they're coming, they're sorry to some degree, and the absolution takes up for their imperfect contrition.
Thank you. I'm so sorry to the person on Facebook who asked that question that I lost. It was Nancy Ann. That was her name, Nancy Ann. Father Hugh Barber is our chaplain. May we have your blessing, Father, before we go.
Beata Maria Virgine Intercedente, cum omnibus sanctis Domini, benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maniat semper.
Amen. You added the Virgin Mary. I did. You don't usually.
I was just inspired to.
You were inspired. I'm happy to hear it. Hey, pro-life open forum next hour with Stephanie Gray. She's one of the greats on that topic, and whether you're pro-life or not, you're welcome to call. If you are, in particular, identify as a pro-choice person, we'd love to have your call and have a talk with Stephanie. 888.
Governor Cuomo will call in.
Yeah, unlikely. See ya.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humani Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Pope Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humani Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humani Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic comes up among friends, family, and coworkers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or by visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Is the Church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
So, you're listening to Catholic Radio. I think it's safe to say that you probably want to become like Jesus. Theosis is a fancy word used to explain the process of becoming like Christ. It's how God takes sinners like you and me and transforms us into who we were created to be. Basically, rockin' saints. Clumsy Theosis is a podcast where I take 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, draw from the great minds and spiritual masters of the Church, boil it down, distill it, and give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Basically, we'll learn how to do this Catholic thing like a boss. Subscribe to Clumsy Theosis wherever good podcasts are found.
Would you like to become a Catholic Answers Live parish partner? We need you to help us spread the word at your local parish. We'll give you bumper stickers, window clings, flyers, everything you need to let your parish know about the best Catholic radio show on the air. We want you to partner with us. Email us at calpartners@catholic.com today and become a Catholic Answers parish partner. A big week for the pro-life movement. Every year this week is a big week for the pro-life movement, which has increasingly become the movement for basic sanity. We talked a little bit last hour about the happenings in New York this week, but lots of good reason for hope as well. But we would love to have conversations with folks who maybe are on the fence about the pro-life arguments, or maybe have decided that they are pro-choice people. You are welcome to call. It's an open forum for Pro-Life Month here and for Pro-Life Week, and we have a wonderful guest to take your calls and engage in those conversations. The number is 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884, and we really do like conversation here, so do not hesitate to call. We're not going to put you off just because you disagree with us or something like that. Our guest is Stephanie Gray, who has given hundreds of pro-life presentations across North America and in the UK and Ireland, Austria, Latvia, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and hundreds of media interviews in defense of life. She's the author of Love Unleashes Life: Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth, as well as a book called A Physician's Guide to Discussing Abortion. She lives in Vancouver, Canada, but you can find her at loveunleasheslife.com. Stephanie Gray, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me back, Cy.
And so, did you make it to any walks or anything this year, or what were your events like?
I was actually just at the March for Life in Washington, D.C., and 2 weeks before that, I was at Focus's Seek 2019 conference in Indianapolis. So there's been a lot of activity in just a few short weeks of 2019.
I hope you saw some of the same people at both, because those Seek people are wonderful, and we need them out there.
They are.
Yeah.
It was my first experience, and the Mass, where there are hundreds of priests processing, honestly felt like heaven on earth. I mean, the Mass always is heaven on earth, but it's like, this is what heaven will be like, the communion of saints, going forward to the wedding feast of the Lamb. It was really moving. I almost was moved to tears at the first Mass. It was beautiful.
How beautiful. How beautiful. Now, you have something I wanted to ask you about, because you have written about all kinds of pro-life and life ethics type questions. But you have written kind of an extended apology regarding in vitro fertilization. And you've also written a shorter version of that as an article. I think it was for, did you say, was it Reason? No, The Federalist. The Federalist,
yeah. Correct. Yes, right. An apologetic. Of course, when people hear the word apologetics, they think, are you apologizing? So it wasn't an apology for our position on IVF, but it was an apologetic explaining why IVF is not the ethical approach to take, even though the desire to have children is a good and God-ordained desire within our nature. And you know, the topic of IVF came in the news recently because Michelle Obama, when she wrote her memoir, Becoming, she wrote about how she and Barack actually struggled with infertility, and they conceived their two daughters, Sasha and Malia, via IVF, which people, for the most part, didn't know until her memoir came out. And so the Federalist asked me to write a piece in which I explained that as good as the children are that were conceived by IVF, just as a child conceived through sexual intimacy but outside of marriage is nonetheless still a good, the means through which those children come into existence, whether it's sex outside of marriage or whether it's IVF, is just two examples. That means isn't ethical, even though the end result is a beautiful and good thing, a human person. And the reason that we ought, go ahead, were you going to say something?
No, please continue.
Well, I was going to say, you know, there are several reasons why I think we can explain to people IVF ought to be rejected. One of the reasons is that human beings are killed to create human beings. So countless individuals are in freezers or have been destroyed in an effort to create embryos. So maybe where couples may have 1, 2, or 3 children as a result of IVF that are brought to term, do they have 5, 10, 15, or 20 children that are frozen somewhere that were created but not implanted, and so forth? The other problem is it treats human beings as objects rather than subjects. There's this mentality that I can just put parts together and I can create a human the way I would create a car, you know, on an assembly line. But because humans humans are objects and not subjects, we shouldn't come into existence the way objects do. There shouldn't just be someone constructing parts.
It's we just got our words flipped there for a second. Human beings are subjects and not objects, and so we shouldn't come in.
Thank you for correcting me. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me. Yes. So because we are subjects, we shouldn't be brought into existence the way objects are brought into existence, which would be a manufacturing, a making. We should be begotten. We should be the fruit of love, sexual intimacy, in which the human person, while the man and woman can create an optimal set of circumstances to try to conceive that human person, knowing, for example, the woman's fertility, timing their sexual intimacy around that. At the end of the day, they don't know which sperm is going to find the egg and fertilize it. They don't know precisely which month that will happen in which whatever egg is released that month. But when you do IVF, you're manufacturing, you're making, and the human person therefore doesn't come to be in the body of the mother below her heart, but comes to be in a petri dish. The first encounter with another human person is not the parent, it's with a scientist. The child's life is in jeopardy, being placed in potentially a freezer temporarily. And so there's so much that is done to the child or that jeopardizes the child, that as good as the child is, we should not use that means to create the individual.
I think there'll be a lot of people who will object because there's basically their idea is that it's only an injustice if the person knows it's an injustice. And the sperm and egg meeting this little one-celled creature, it doesn't really have any rights because it doesn't have any clue what's going on.
If someone were to say that, I would make the point that even a newborn child isn't going to know what's going on around him or her in a way that we know what's going on. And yet we don't mistreat a newborn child. So of course, the one-celled embryo, the preborn child after that, but still early in pregnancy, doesn't have an awareness. But the morality of an action is not grounded in whether the individual who the action is being acted upon is aware or not at the time the action is occurring.
Right.
We have to look at the nature of the action itself.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I guess we see that truth in that horrible story we just had about the comatose woman who gave birth. That clearly a great injustice was done to her, whether she's aware of that or not. It is a great injustice. Fair enough. Our number 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Stephanie Gray, author of Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating, is our guest this hour. And if you, whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, we'd love to take your call with anything having to do with the pro-life agenda. You also talk about the end of life, euthanasia, assisted suicide, and all those kinds of things, as well as your talks on abortion.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to Texas on Friday, where I will be speaking in Austin at Boots on the Ground, which is a youth conference, and I'll be specifically giving a 1-hour pro-life apologetics session on the topic of assisted suicide, which is a growing problem in both your country and mine and around the world, and really equipping people to be able to speak more winsomely and persuasively on a topic in which increasing numbers of people are thinking it's totally acceptable to just end your life if you don't want to keep living.
888-318-7884, that number. Let's go to Frank. We'll start there with Frank in Indianapolis, Indiana, listening on the EWTN app. Frank, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Hi, good evening. I don't know how to ask, but I think it's just basically I'm pro-choice, but the rest of my family doesn't like the fact that I vote with Donald Trump. I mean, they look at all this terrible stuff that he's done, but they don't look at the wonderful thing of, pro-life. And so I get accused of being against my own, I guess, ethnicity of being Hispanic because of the wall and the DACA situation, all the immigration situation. So I'm like, I know what they're talking about, all the terrible things that Trump does, but I guess they don't understand that it's not that I'm debunking everything and excusing everything that he does, but I'm telling them, if you're not born and you don't have life and you don't get raised to make it to 18 so you can vote, then how can you change the world if you don't have any life? If somebody yanks you from your mother's womb, I mean.
Are you?
But I've explained that to them, but I don't know what else to say to them.
Fair enough. Let's say, Frank, I want to ask Stephanie then, because it does seem what you were asking is, what else is there to say to family members who say those kinds of things?
Yes, well, I think you've made a good point already, which is that the right to life is the most fundamental. And any other right or desire that we have, a right to freedom, a right to vote, cannot be acted upon if we have no life with which to exercise these other things. So you've made a very good point that that's the most foundational of rights. I think when people raise, the issue of a politician supporting bad things as well as good things, is I would just focus on one issue at a time. And I would say, let's set aside the person for a moment and let's just look at the topic, the issue of abortion, and then engage your family members on that. Do they acknowledge and accept, as science has established, that life begins at fertilization? If they don't, when would they say life begins, and begin a discussion with them about that? I think another point we can make is the test of any civil society is how it treats the most vulnerable. And so the question we have to ask is, who of our society is the most vulnerable? Well, that would be anyone who cannot speak for themselves, defend themselves, run away if they're in danger. And that would put preborn children would fall into that category. They cannot speak for themselves. They cannot run away if an abortionist instruments are coming towards them. And so they are the most vulnerable, which means a civil society will protect the most vulnerable, not harm the most vulnerable. And so if we see these vulnerable children who are weak and dependent, we have a responsibility to care for them, unless someone doesn't think they're children, which is why the debate needs to be had, not about who the politician is and other issues that individual will hold, but when does life begin and how ought we treat our fellow human beings, particularly children?
Frank, we got to go to a break, but if you'll hang on, I'll ask Assistant Producer Marie to get your address, and we'll send you a copy of Trent Horn, his book, Persuasive Pro-Life, which may be helpful to you. Again, the number 888-318-7884. It's a pro-life open forum today. We have our very fine guest, Stephanie Gray, here with us. You can find out all about Stephanie at loveunleasheslife.com. 888-318-7884 is the number. You can still get your free Kindle copy of Trent's other book, Made This Way, that he wrote with Layla Miller. Just go to Amazon.com and you go to Made This Way. You search Made This Way, and then you go to the Kindle page, because we're giving away the Kindle edition, the electronic edition, the digital edition of Trent's book, Made This Way. 4,000 downloads thus far. Go get yours at Amazon.com.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Catholic Radio gives us an opportunity to become part of a larger family. It can be so lonely when we are struggling in our faith or just try to live our faith on our own. But Catholic Radio connects us to that larger community of faith where we're able to get the support, the encouragement, and the grace that we need to not just struggle on, but to really celebrate all the blessings that God brings into our life through our Catholic faith.
Dr. Greg Popchak thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest, Stephanie Gray, is one of the preeminent defenders of life in all its stages, both in North America and around the world. And I say North America because she lives in that country to the north of us, Canada, in the Vancouver area. Did I pronounce that wrong? I sometimes get that wrong.
Well, you know.
Yeah. By the way, I always like to ask you, because you know all about this. It seems to me that Canada is always on these, especially the end of life issues, one step further down the slope than the United States is? And is it?
We are.
Is that the case?
We are. Unfortunately, it seems to be more of a, liberal, I don't even think the word liberal really captures it, but morally loose, you could say, society. And then I would say even one step further down the slope would be the UK. I would say they're even worse, unfortunately. But yes, we have a lot of challenges in Canada, particularly as it relates to assisted suicides, recent legalization on a very broad level, whereas you only have it legal in just a handful of states right now.
Right. So it's nationwide in Canada, where here it's state by state.
Yes.
Having to do with the Supreme Court decision, maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago in Seattle. It was brought from folks in Seattle, but so our Supreme Court for once had the sense to say, no, we're not going to nationalize the issue. But it's dangerous. Why? Why do you say to people, you should say no to assisted suicide and euthanasia?
Well, because a civil society does not kill its weakest and most vulnerable members. And those who are sick, those who are disabled, those who are near death are very weak and vulnerable. There are, emotions, inclinations, pain that can skew the decisions that we make, and we need those around us who have a more objective view to help us see clearly when we feel that we can't. And just giving into, in a moment of weakness, someone's desire for assistance with a sooner death rather than the natural death is not really helping that person when they're at their weakest and their most vulnerable. And I think it puts other people in jeopardy who would never want assisted suicide, but may say in a moment of great pain, I just want to die, and suddenly find themselves be taken seriously and have, the quote unquote medical professionals come in and start to, write down notes and do a little interview to see if that they are candidates for assisted suicide, when all they meant was, I am in so much pain. This is the degree of anguish and agony that I feel. Help me. And when help me turns into kill me, then who is safe?
If you find yourself a defender of assisted suicide or euthanasia or abortion, we'd love to hear from you as well this hour. Our number 888-318-7884. As a matter of fact, I'd like to go far enough to say, if you'd like to defend a pro-choice position, whether at the beginning of life or the end of life, if you'd like to defend suicide or euthanasia or abortion, we'll send you right to the top of the line, because we would love to have that conversation with you. 888-318-7884. We go now to Gary. I don't have a location for you, Gary, but you are up next. Your question for Dr. Stephanie Gray.
Well,
I'm not a doctor, but
I did it again. I think I did that last time you were on as well. I promoted you to doctor. I apologize. I don't know if I promoted or demoted you, but I did it again. Gary, your question for Stephanie.
Thank you. That's Gary from Missouri. And what I'd like to do is just pose to you both, because I realize that you understand this, but I'm over 65 years old, and I can say, and I was adopted, and I've talked to my original blood mother, the one who birthed me, and I also lived with my parents that adopted me. And I just want to say that I'm thankful for those women that make the choice to not destroy life, because had I been destroyed, I would not have had the opportunity to be blessed by the things that I was blessed throughout my life. And also, from now that I have my grandchildren, I unfortunately had a daughter who had a baby outside of marriage, and I am just tickled pink that she chose to choose life and keep this grandson, because he is nothing more than a beautiful diamond in my life. So I just wanted to offer that opinion and throw it out that us adopted children, thanks be to God, there are people out there who say, we want life and we want to share, even though we can't maybe keep our child, we want that child to go to someone or to be loved by someone and carry out their life to the fullest. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you both for your program.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Thanks very much. Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I think it's so important that adoption be something that is promoted more and stories like yours be something that is shared to give the adoptive mother hope that in placing her child into the arms of another person, a couple, a family, that that child can be raised well and that child can go on to lead a beautiful life and create more life through children and grandchildren. And I think adoption, however, is often resisted by society and by individuals because it's perhaps the most difficult of all the choices in the moment. Because with abortion, what happens is the woman in crisis is thinking, I'm going to get rid of this pregnancy for the most part in the first trimester, before I feel this baby kick, before I bond with this baby, before I connect with this baby. So I will be eliminating someone I have no bond with. Adoption is very different. Adoption says, I'm going to carry through the rest of this pregnancy, which means at some point over these 9 months, I'm going to feel this baby kick. I'm going to bond with this baby. I'm going to go through painful labor for this baby. I'm going to hold and see this baby and therefore want to keep this child. And then I'm going to make the decision to place this child in the arms of someone else. And in the short term, that is a painful choice to make. That is a difficult choice to make, but it's the choice of love, because as St. Thomas Aquinas says, to love is to will the other's good. And so that birth mom who places her child for adoption is doing so because she wills her child's good. And in her circumstances, perhaps is discerned that the best good she can provide for her child is an adoptive family. That might not be the case for another woman in crisis. She might find that in her situation, she can provide all that the child needs by parenting the child. But for the woman who discerns the best thing she can give her child is a loving adoptive home, she needs to be encouraged to know that there are beautiful adoptive homes out there and that there are many options to choose open adoption, where that woman can stay in contact with the adoptive family, with her biological child, to know how the child is doing so that she can still stay connected to the child that she understandably has bonded with and deeply loves.
888-3187-884, the number. Stephanie Gray, our guest this hour. It's interesting, as you were speaking, I was thinking, Stephanie, that every child now, given the conditions in our country, the mother made a positive choice. So for a mother to give up a child for adoption, that already is a message that child, they're going to reason it out at some point, that she didn't have to do that, that she did that for them.
Right. That she was thinking of them and their well-being. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Let us go to, where am I going right now? Let us go to Karen in North Carolina, listening on Sirius XM Satellite Channel 130. Karen, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Hi, Stephanie. Right now our family, my husband and I are very pro-life to natural death. But his brother, who is an attorney now and retired, is spending all his time pushing forward assisted suicide and making it legal, accessible in North Carolina. And it's kind of making every Christmas, Thanksgiving very awkward because he tries to bring it up, and he just thinks it's just okay. And being raised Catholic, Catholic, all the families have been Catholic, we just don't know where this came from, and we don't know how to even approach the subject with him to rethink this.
So how would you broach that?
So a few thoughts come to mind. The first is, especially when you talk about his background, being raised Catholic, but now he is on a mission, he is determined, as I always think, what is underneath that passion? Does he have some connection to someone who has suffered extensively, and this is almost a reaction to observing and entering into that suffering even, and he's misguided in his solution, but perhaps that's influencing him. So whenever the emotions get involved, whenever a personal connection gets involved, that's significant, and we want to discover that. So I would have a lot of curiosity. Where does your passion come from? When did you first begin to care about this issue? When did you first hold this position? And did you used to reject assisted suicide? When did it change? Why did it change? All of those answers are going to shed light on the issue. The other thing is I would tell him in all genuineness you want to read the best argument he has for why euthanasia and assisted suicide should be made legal. And would he be willing to provide you that in a book, a blog, whatever the case may be? Then hopefully your receptivity to hearing his argument will allow you to say, and in fairness, if I give you my best out there that I think makes the case why it should be rejected, would you be willing to read that? And then can we have a discussion after each of us has read the alternative perspective? A book that I highly recommend is one written by a former colleague of mine, Jonathan Van Maren, in partnership with another author and friend of mine, Blaise Elaine. It's about discussing assisted suicide, and I've written a review of it on my blog. So if you go to loveunleasheslife.com and go to the blog, it's probably in one of the most recent 10 blogs that I've written, and you can read all about the book and where to order it. There's also extensive reflections on my website on the topic of assisted suicide and euthanasia. And one of the philosophies that I rely heavily on when addressing this topic is the insights of psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Dr. Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning about his experiences of suffering in the concentration camps and his theories in psychiatry and psychology. So I can elaborate that on that a little more after the break, because I think I'm hearing music.
Yep, fair enough. Karen, if you can hang on, that would be great through the break. 888-318-7884, our number. If you happen to be a pro-choice person, whether it's at the beginning of life or the end, or if it's for in vitro fertilization, you go to the top of the line. 888-318-7884.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it is outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception, using scripture, papal and magisterial teaching, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine. Trent put forward a compelling case for Catholic teaching with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging onto the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Tom Price.
And I'm Gloria Purvis. Tomorrow, we'll bring you all the Catholic news of the day, along with interviews with newsmakers and our godly counsel.
Please join us for Morning Glory, 7 a.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Gloria didn't say my name. I hate it when Gloria throws it back to us and she doesn't say hi to me. But whatever, that's all right. She's a big, important star. I understand. 888-318-7884 is the number. Our guest, Stephanie Gray. And we were speaking with Karen in North Carolina about assisted suicide when we went to the break. And you were sharing about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes, thank you. And one of the things in his book that he speaks about is that in the face of suffering, what determines whether we despair or not is whether we find meaning. He even has come up with a mathematical equation to express this point. He says D equals S minus M. despair is suffering without meaning. The point being that despair is what will ultimately lead someone to suicide. And he says that the S in that equation, suffering, cannot be eliminated from the human experience. That is a part of our lives. And so whether or not we despair in light of suffering is whether or not we find meaning in the situation that we're in. And Dr. Frankl made it his life's purpose, not only in the concentration camps when he was suffering, but afterwards when he became or continued with his psychiatry, he made it his life's purpose to help people find meaning in their suffering so that they never did despair. And he cites an example of a teenager in Texas who was a quadriplegic as a result of a car accident. And he said, let me tell you how she spends her days. She watches the news, and anytime she comes across a story of someone who is suffering in some way, going through a difficult time, she asks for an assistant to bring her a little stick and place the stick in her mouth. And she then uses the stick to pound out keys on a keyboard in order to write notes of encouragement to the suffering soul she watched about in the news. And Dr. Frankl said that young woman lives a life of profound meaning. She's not despairing even though she's suffering because she's found meaning. And so, Karen, what I would say ultimately is the main point I think we need to get across to people who support assisted suicide is we need to help people find meaning in the situation that they're in. And even when the situation is as profoundly agonizing as someone becoming a quadriplegic as that teenager did, it's even in that situation that she is uniquely positioned to motivate and inspire other suffering souls in a way I couldn't, precisely because of the suffering that she herself faced. So the key is to help people find meaning, and that's certainly one perspective to hold. But if you go to loveunleasheslife.com, you can read a lot of my reflections on assisted suicide and find that blog advertising the book on discussing assisted suicide by my friends Jonathan Van Maren and Blaise Allain.
Karen, thank you very, very much for that call. 888-318-7884 is our number. It just seems obvious that if suicide becomes just one option among others, or if euthanasia does, we're not going to do as good a job of figuring out how to help, first of all, alleviate the suffering to the degree that we can, and second of all, help people find meaning at the end of their life.
Absolutely. When people are in pain, our immediate reaction is to want to alleviate their pain. So we have to get creative about where are the pain meds, or they don't even exist. Well, then let's get scientists to develop better pain meds.
Right.
But if we start killing the people who are in pain, then we lose the motivation to come up with cures, to come up with better, interventions and so forth. So it's a very big problem with consequences people aren't realizing.
Let's go to Tim in Indiana. You are up next. Tim, your question for Stephanie Gray.
Yeah, guns are essentially used to kill, in effect carry out the death penalty. Why would any Catholic think it prudent to own a gun, thus like wishing the death penalty on someone?
Could you maybe elaborate a little more on what you mean? Would you agree, for example, that a gun could be used if someone is starving, a gun could be used to kill a deer and provide food for a hungry family?
Yes, I'm speaking more in the sense of like handguns or guns that a person uses for self-defense. I'm not really speaking in terms of hunting guns or hunting.
Can I just ask? I just want to ask real quick. Is your sense, Tim, or your position that we're not really pro-life if we're advocating for guns, or if we want people to have guns or that kind of thing?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Fair enough, Tim. Stephanie.
So I certainly think that the perspective that we should hold is that it is always wrong to directly and intentionally kill an innocent human being. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Tim? Okay. And then I think another perspective I think we could probably agree on is that when someone is committing an act of aggression, we should only use the amount of force necessary to stop that aggression. So, for example, if a teenage boy is beating up a 5-year-old boy, would you agree we should absolutely intervene and we should stop the act of aggression? But would you agree that pulling out a gun and just shooting the teenager when you could jump right in and separate them, pulling out the gun would be using more force than necessary to stop the act of aggression?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So I guess the question then becomes, if we can agree on those principles, is it possible that there are some acts of aggression that when they are being committed, the only way to stop them would be force that requires the use of a gun? And an example would be a police officer comes upon a situation. Do we think that the police officer ought to be equipped with a gun so that if the only force able to stop the aggression he encounters is a gun, that he ought to have the gun accessible and use it? Would you agree with that?
No.
Oh, so do you think police officers should not be armed with guns?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a position I've just not heard. Would you acknowledge that that's a position that most people wouldn't hold, that most individuals believe police officers who are called to protect the vulnerable should have a weapon on them that, if needed, could protect the vulnerable?
I believe that most people think that and believe that. However, I'm kind of leaning to the idea that no one should have guns, because a gun is effectively a death penalty, and basically Catholics are not for the death penalty except for in extremely rare cases.
Right. I mean, the general principle, again, is that the death penalty would only be appropriate in circumstances in which the only way to prevent someone from being a threat to society is by means of the death penalty. And that's why in practice, we can keep people in prison and prevent them from being a threat to society, which would make the death penalty, my position would be something that we do not act upon. I think fundamentally, though, the point that we need to get across is all human beings are made in the image of God. All human beings are valuable, unrepeatable, and irreplaceable, and we ought to respect and protect our fellow human beings. When someone becomes an aggressor and is going to attack another human being, we don't look at them, if we intervene with a knife, with a gun, with a taser, with our own hands, whatever method we use to stop the aggressor from committing an act on an innocent party. We don't intervene with whatever tool we use because we think the aggressor's life is less valuable. We aren't making a judgment that they are suddenly void of dignity. No, we believe they're still valuable individuals made in the image of God, and what we're intervening on is their behavior, not their person. And we are trying to stop them from doing something that not only would harm an innocent party, but goes against their nature, that goes against their dignity. And we don't want them to not only harm the other party, but to harm their self, to harm their soul by inflicting this act. And that the church, and I would say any civil society, would say it is a good and noble act to stop an act of aggression, but to only use the amount of force necessary to do that. And in practice, that's often the question, is how much force is needed to stop an act of aggression.
Tim, as a Catholic, you would prefer no guns at all. You would take the position that no one should have a gun.
Yes, gun. From my understanding, gun is the essential use of a gun is to kill. So nobody should have a gun.
And Tim, are you also pro-life? I mean, you support the right of a baby to be born, and you don't want the elderly committing suicide, that kind of thing.
That all seems logical, yes.
Stephanie, I think that you addressed Tim's question. I hope that she did, Tim. But I also think, as a Catholic, his position is perfectly consistent. There's nothing the church would say that Tim needs to correct. If you want to believe that nobody should have a gun, you're welcome to believe that. Am I right or wrong?
I don't know. I would say that the call has just fascinated me because I've never heard anyone say they don't think a police officer should have a gun. So I just find that an interesting thought to reflect upon.
Yeah.
I think we would say that people have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable.
Yeah.
And to intervene when the vulnerable are under attack. And the question is, what does that intervention look like? And yeah, maybe as you say, you don't have to use a gun.
Maybe, I mean, that's not the real world. I don't think. I mean, in the real world, police officers need guns and all, because there's guns everywhere. But I mean, as long as a person is I'm not advocating a moral evil. He's welcome to that view.
Right. Yeah.
A police officer called, but he didn't want to go on the air. I am a police officer, and it is possible to shoot someone and not kill them. Sometimes it is necessary to stop one use. Oh, okay, so fair enough. That's also true.
Which is the gun is the tool, and it's about using the amount of force with that tool. So the force doesn't have to be shoot to kill. The force could be shoot to maim, that the person can no longer continue with their course of behavior.
888-318-7884 is the number. Stephanie Gray is our guest. It is Pro-Life Month. We have celebrated just this week the 46th anniversary of the infamous Roe versus Wade decision. I want to ask you when we come back, my question to you is your level of hope currently, because I've been asking people that all week. But if you are a pro-choice person, we would love to hear from you. If you are someone who advocates for assisted suicide or euthanasia, we'd also love to have a conversation with you. You're very welcome to call 888-318-7884. Right back with more Catholic Answers Live right after this.
This is Harry Connick Jr., and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Now there's a fast and easy way to get in touch with EWTN. The EWTN Everything number. Call 1-800-447-EWTN to get the latest information on programming, special events, pilgrimages, and more. Our EWTN Family Viewer Services representatives are ready to help you with whatever your needs may be. The EWTN Everything number. 1-800-447-EWTN. EWTN.
Yes. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett. Our guest is Stephanie Gray. If you want to know more about Stephanie, if you'd like to find her writing and find about what she is up to and what Love Unleashes Life is all about, Stephanie is available. You can find out all about her at loveunleasheslife.com. Her books are Love Unleashes Life, Abortion and the Art of Communicating Truth, as well as A Physician's Guide to Discussing Abortion. And the communicating truth part is striking to me this week, because we have such a demonstration of absolutely almost worlds apart views regarding abortion, where we have this celebratory attitude and in both the press and in the government in New York about a law to allow pretty much anybody to kill any baby as long as it hasn't been born yet. I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's not much of an exaggeration if you see what it's about. And we have also this kind of sense of hope in the pro-life movement that maybe Roe versus Wade could possibly really be overturned, not 100 years from now, but in our lifetime, if not sooner.
Mm-hmm. I think it absolutely can be. I often say that when you have great evil in your midst, it often is going to feel like it gets worse before it gets better.
Right.
And so when we see things like what happened in New York, yeah, it becomes overwhelming, and we think, oh my gosh, how much more, how much worse can it get? But there is a lot of reason for hope. You have hundreds of thousands of people gathering who are pro-life, and many more who don't come to the march but are still very much pro-life. And I think we know the end of the story. We know that Jesus is Lord. We know that God triumphs, that good is stronger than evil, and that people are changing their minds. And I think one thing that is important for us to focus on is real connection, face-to-face connection encountering people who are wounded, listening to their stories, and drawing them to a truth that will set them free. And the more we do that, the more we're going to see people be transformed and come to know Christ.
And you have hope among the young that they're getting it, that the message is getting through to young people.
They are. I just spoke at the Students for Life of America conference, almost 2,000 young people that were very much on fire by the message and wanting to share it with their friends and use the analogies and the questions that I had imparted to them. So there's definitely a lot of reason for hope.
I have noticed too that in much of the press that I read celebrating these events in New York, there is still the argument, the pro-choice argument seems often to rely on the idea that those who are pro-life don't like women or want to repress women. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that argument before, but how does one?
When have I not?
I don't know how. I mean, you get to the point where at least I do. I feel like what can get through that so that a person could at least see that a person of goodwill might possibly believe you shouldn't kill the unborn.
Right. Well, I think we need to ask good questions like, what do you mean by that? And in what way do you think objecting to abortion is oppressing women? If I object to a woman killing her infant who's born, is that oppressing women? Okay, well then if that's not oppressing women, saying that she as a woman does not have a right to kill her born child, why is it somehow acceptable to say that she as a woman has a right to kill her preborn child? So to get them to try to explain a position that we know is indefensible. Another question I like to ask is, if you believe a woman has a right to control her own body, when does that right begin? Does it begin when the woman begins her life? And when does her life begin? To make the point that at the moment of fertilization, if you're a female, that's when that gets determined. And that there are females in the womb that are being intentionally targeted for destruction through abortion precisely because they're female. Several years ago, The Economist magazine had a headline story, 100 million missing women from the world as a result of abortion and infanticide, in which 100 million. I mean, and that was a few years ago. I mean, more than that now. And to make the point that the truly pro-woman stance is one which values all human beings, including women, but men as well, by virtue of their existence, not by what they look like or how other people feel about them or whether they're XY or XX. We value the individual because the individual is human, and we acknowledge that no human has a right to end another human's life. So no woman has a right to end her child's life the way no man has a right to end his child's life.
Let's go to Wayne in Johnson City, Tennessee, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM satellite radio. Wayne, your question or comment for Stephanie Gray.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Wayne. Hi.
Hi. Good evening. So I want to say outright that I do think abortion is a sin. But my position is, and I'd be very willing and open to your opinion because I'm not 100% set on this, but if we're going to discuss the matter of sin, it seems to me slightly hypocritical on the part of Catholics and the church in general that we focus on abortion but not other extraordinarily detrimental sins like divorce, which Christ speaks of directly, or premarital sex or anything like this. It seems to me in a country, in America, where we're basically established as a secular nation, choosing one particular sin is kind of sort of like, Saudi Arabia, imposing certain restrictions on women because of religious proclivities or something like that. So I struggle with this. I do think it's a sin, but I kind of sit on the fence of, well, a woman has a right to choose sin in America.
Great question, Wayne. And so this would be my question back. Would you agree that the Catholic Church in her teachings very clearly states that rape would be a sin?
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
And do you believe that we should have laws against rape?
No doubt about that.
Okay, so what that shows then is that we recognize that there's a position a religious institution can hold, rape is wrong, that a non-religious institution such as a government can also share, that we can have a different opinion on religion, the government versus the Catholic Church, but we can share an opinion on a moral issue, namely that when an innocent party is being harmed by another party, that the law of a non-religious institution should be set up so as to protect that innocent party from the aggressor. And if we hold that view as it comes to rape, then the question is, when a woman is pregnant, is there more than her body involved? And I think we know the answer is yes, because if she's not pregnant, she never goes to an abortion clinic. So the very fact that she's pregnant is a concession that within her body is another body. So therefore, if her choice to have an abortion is going to destroy the body of another party, an innocent party who cannot defend herself, who is in the only environment she should be in at that age, namely her mom's womb, if the act of abortion will destroy an innocent party, then shouldn't a non-religious institution such as a government have a law in place to protect that innocent party from abortion, the way that same institution has a law in place to protect an innocent party such as a woman from rape?
Now, I see that logic, but even on that position, can I make the same argument with divorce, where a man leaves his wife for another woman and devastates her completely and causes irreparable harm? So can I make the same statement that we should be advocating as the church for laws against divorce?
I think you could make the argument, but whether or not you succeed in that argument doesn't mean a more clear-cut issue like abortion, where you're dismembering the body of an innocent child, that we shouldn't have a law in that case. But I think this is why people make the argument, the institution of no-fault divorce, where someone could just, get out of the marriage that they've committed to, and the person they've committed to, and the children that have resulted from that relationship, to just have a no-fault divorce, it's over, is actually a problem for the well-being of society. And there's people who make non-religious arguments in favor of upholding the commitment of marriage, or at least looking far more deeply before society would allow some type of legal acknowledgement of a separation of the union. So I think, sure, an argument could be made and people could go down that path. But even if there's debate about that issue, I would say that the topic of abortion is more analogous to the issue of rape than the issue of divorce. Not that we shouldn't consider implementing laws on that. What do you think about that, Wayne?
Oh, Wayne, go ahead.
Argument with rape. I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Wayne.
Sorry, just start again if you could.
I would have to think about the argument of whether or not it constitutes rape. I see your position, but it still seems like there's kind of a gap, because again, it comes down to what right. I do think a woman has a right to choose sin with her own body, whether it be premarital sex, whether it be using illegal drugs, whatever the case may be. And if her choice is to unfortunately violate her own body and in turn, terminate the life of her child, then that's an issue. The other piece I struggle with is, even St. Paul himself said, is it better to be here in the world or in heaven with Christ? So even if the woman does sin, the child is still with Christ in heaven. And I do believe that. So yes, there'll have to be a judgment for it. Yes, there'll have to be atonement for it. But at the same time, it feels hypocritical to pick on one, because obviously we're all emotionally drawn to the children, but not the other, which actually generationally could be even more detrimental, which is divorce and other like issues.
Well, and again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't go down that path and relook at the laws on divorce and what they actually say and what they should say and so forth. But when you use the example of a woman choosing to use drugs, or you use the example of a woman having sex outside of marriage, in those cases, there isn't offspring involved in those very acts that are being dismembered, decapitated, and disemboweled. When she's opting to have an abortion, it's not her body the abortion is being acted upon. It's her body that is being entered, but in order to act upon the child's body. So the question I would ask is this: what laws do we expect civil societies to have when it comes to how parents ought to treat their offspring? And so I think it would be safe to answer that by saying civil societies should have laws that require parents to care for, not harm their offspring. So to meet their offspring's basic needs, food, clothing, shelter. And if you fail in those areas, you'll be charged with neglect. If you directly act in a negative way so as to inflict harm, not by withholding something, but by acting upon the child in a very negative way, that also should be considered unlawful. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. That makes perfect sense.
Okay, so then I would say, since science teaches us that life begins at fertilization, and therefore parenthood begins at fertilization, then wouldn't it logically follow, if we have laws expecting parents to care for their born children in terms of meeting their basic needs and not inflicting harm, we should have laws requiring parents to care for their preborn children, meeting their basic needs and not inflicting harm?
Yeah, so again, I want to reiterate that I do believe it's a sin. I do believe, fundamentally everything you're saying. But again, I'm somewhat arguing the secular case that here in America, a woman has I think, a right to choose sin.
But is it the right to choose sin if the sin is to take the life of another person? That's what I think Stephanie is saying.
I think there's a difference between a right to do something and an ability to do something. We all have the ability to do sin, but we don't have the right to sin. I can sin, but the question is, should I? And what ought the woman do?
Stephanie Gray, thank you so much for another very fine hour. I hope we can have you on soon.
You.
I want to do a just pro-abortion people call. That's it. I want to do an hour like that with you.
Let's do it.
Love Unleashes Life is the book and the website. Go to Love Unleashes Life and get to know Stephanie Gray better. You won't be sorry that you did. Thanks again, Stephanie. Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. We'll see you then, God willing.